Welcome to Machine Minds, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Terusian, founder of Samson Rose, a recruiting and search business focused on the robotics and AI industries. The Machine Minds show is where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and artificial intelligence. As a staffing industry leader with a passion for the frontiers of technology, I'm pleased to be bringing you intimate conversations with the founders, investors, and trailblazers who are at the heart of the AI and robotics revolution. In each episode, we dig into their journeys, the applications of the products they're working on, and the breakthroughs that are shaping our future. Join us as we explore how these machine minds are transforming the way we live, work, and understand our world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about this amazing field, you'll learn something new with each episode. Let's delve into the extraordinary. Let's delve into machine minds. Hello and welcome to Machine Minds. I'm your host, Greg Terusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's very special episode, I'm joined by Anthony Jules, co-founder and CEO of Robust AI. Thanks for being on the show today, Anthony.
Thanks, Greg. It's my pleasure. I'm honored to be on your 100th show.
Thank you so much. Yes, this is our 100th episode. And thank you for everyone who has been listening and supporting. And thank you, Anthony, for blessing me with your presence for this milestone. This is huge. So I'm very excited about it. Let's jump into it. So firstly, obviously welcome, but to start us off, what's something about you that most people don't expect from a robotics founder?
Okay, that's an interesting one. I think the thing that might be most different is I meditate every day, and I've been doing that for 15 or so years. I did it on and off for years before, but my practice has been pretty strong for the last decade and a half. And it's the mind space that's most different than how I spend the rest of my day, which of course is, building machines that I'm trying to make alive.
Yeah. Amazing. And how long do you meditate for, and at what point in your day are you doing it?
It's an exercise in habit building. So I typically meditate 20 to 30 minutes a day. But the reason I do that is because my promise to myself is that I'll meditate for 5. And it's just how you build a habit. Like, the deal is I do 5, but because you've kind of reduced the constraints on yourself, you end up sitting for 20 to 30. Whereas if you say 20 to 30, you'll never get to it. So
it's so true. It's so true. I use this app called Insight Timer, which is really good. And you can, choose your time and all of that stuff. I always find if I do it too short, the bell at the end kind of throws me, but then I want to stay for longer. But if to your point, if you do it for longer, you never want to, you get agitated.
Yeah. I love that though, because it makes you hungry to get back on the mat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great point. And it's a good reminder for myself. I need to be better. So thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So back to you now. For those who don't know, you've had a fantastic career in the robotics world. Redwood Robotics, Google X or X, Foreman, and now as a founder and CEO of Robust AI. If you had to give your journey a career headline, or your journey a headline, what would that be?
Yeah, I build things, and some of those things are physical products. And some of those things are companies, and sometimes I do those in an overlapping way. But that's always been my focus, even as a teenager. It was really the central tenet of what I did. I build things. I can't help it. So I might as well focus it on something that's going to be the highest value. And everything I do ends up being at the intersection of technology and human behavior. And that's been true in robotics. It's been true in video games. It's been true in everything I built.
When you say you can't help it, it's just something that's ingrained in you.
It's, I think it's telling that when I look for an activity, like a positive activity that I'm going to do on my own time, I'm usually building a parametric 3D model and printing it on a 3D printer. That's my idea of not working, but doing something fun on the side. Yes, I can't help it.
I love that. All right, let's talk about the path to robust AI. So take us back to the early career chapters. What originally pulled you into robotics and AI?
Yeah, so I've actually been interested in robotics and AI since I was quite small. I started programming when I was 11. The first AI I wrote was trying to figure out how to do opponents in video games. I wrote a game when I was 16. So I knew I wanted to go to MIT and study AI and robotics. And that's really what, formed my career. But the pull there was this, this idea that we could build machines that do dull, dirty, dangerous things in the world, and respond to people in a way that lets people get the value of this giant abundance that we're creating without the hassle of managing all of that abundance. Because that's one of the flip sides of bounty. If you don't pay attention, it ends up owning you because you spend all of your time managing assets, managing money, managing all of these things that I don't think are as important as relationship and self-development.
Yeah, that's powerful. What were some of the pivotal lessons or even patterns that you noticed from previous roles in your career that influence how you're now building robust AI?
I think the biggest one really hit, funny, almost a decade ago, but it's really when deep learning started to become incredibly effective. It was that ImageNet moment. And so the first thing is really modern AI verges on the magical. We can do some stuff now that is beyond what we would have guessed, but not in the ways that we thought. So it requires some nuance in how you apply it to get value. Kind of the other patterns existed before that. And it's really that flawless user experience is what drives adoption. People vote with their fingers, people vote with their feet, people vote with their wallets. And what drives that is something that they can relate to at a behavioral level. And then the other thing, of course, is that being cost competitive drives adoption. And a lot of what we're doing in robust AI, is connecting those three things. So, building something that's cost effective, has incredible experience for the user, and appropriately leverages the magical aspects of what's possible now with modern AI.
Awesome. So let's talk about robust AI in a bit more detail. In your own words, what does robust AI do and who are you serving today?
Mm-hmm. So what we do is we build collaborative autonomous mobile robots. And we build those for real world environments like warehouses and manufacturing and the user doesn't have to change their environment, and they're safe around people. So our flagship product, we call Carter. It's a little bit tongue in cheek because it's literally a robot that's built to look like a cart. And it does picking, it handles picking, sorting, and transportation, all in a human-centric way. I think one of our big differences is that we've leapfrogged straight into the technology that's available now. So it's a fully AI-driven robot. We don't use LiDAR. We actually use only cameras. And that allows seamless understanding of the world and seamless interaction with people. And it's really, and we deliver that in a robots as a service, monthly payment, so that it's really easy for customers to understand what the ROI is going to be, and they essentially get ROI on day one.
Day one, yeah. I was lucky enough to try out Carter at, I think it was Robo Business last year at some point. I saw Rodney's keynote and then obviously the demo, but then on your booth. And I was just like, at first you're like, oh, that seems interesting. And obviously demos are one thing. You've been in the industry for a long time, so I've seen a lot of it. And you're like, oh, you take everything a little bit with a bit of skepticism. But then going to your booth and trying it, I was blown away. I mean, it was very responsive and very user friendly, and you can see the impact even from someone who's not in, logistics or picking and placing stuff. So yeah, it's very, very cool product.
Yeah, well, thank you. The delight that I get is when I see customers in some ways forget that it's a robot and start using it ahead of when we would have, scheduled, how they use it. My favorite example was seeing a supervisor without training before we even got there, have 3 robots lined up, and he wanted to change the priority of how these robots were going to get unloaded and packages were sent. He didn't have to look for a laptop or a tablet or some special thing. Literally grabbed the robot that was in the back, pulled it to the front of the queue, said, unload this one first, and then the rest of the system just flexed around that. That's the equivalent of making a priority decision, informing the system, informing the people. But it was done in a way where you just use the skills that a human uses, moving stuff in the world and saying something verbally to the people who are involved, and you're done. And when I see moments like that, is when I get most excited about what we're building.
Yeah, you can see that impact straight away. And I can't remember who it was that, I don't know if it's just like a generic saying or there was someone specifically who said it, but they were like, the point when robots are no longer considered robots is when they're just like an appliance, right? Like your Roomba or whatever. And if it's like so easy for someone to use in that way, it changes your mentality about it. And for a lot of industries or individuals, they get either overwhelmed or weary of new technology or something that might be, they don't have the capacity to go and program, right?
Yeah.
Or troubleshoot.
I love that idea, because I think that threshold, when people don't think about it as a robot, think about it more as an appliance, i.e., they think about the function and the value that they're getting from it. That's when I think we win, because it just means, oh, this is a thing that provides value to a person with the lowest possible cognitive load that you're asking them for. And that's when you win. That's when something gets adopted quickly.
100%. And then it's sticky, right? And that's what you want, especially with the RAS model. So I'm sorry, I wanted to jump back. What was the aha moment for you and Rodney, obviously your co-founder, that sparked like the founding of Robust AI or even Carter as the first product?
Yeah. So the aha moment, we've been doing a lot of market research and discovery with customers. And the aha moment was, and we've been trying to do that with just making fancy software on other people's hardware. And the aha moment for us was realizing that this opportunity that we saw was fantastic. Robots that share space with people and they're perfectly safe and they can be deployed in any environment without needing to change that environment. Hundreds of billions of dollars of opportunity. But the aha moment was that it would fail for human factors reasons if people didn't have agency. That was the aha moment. And we're like, oh, we can build all of this, but if people don't have agency, all those little failures, all those little things where a robot's in the way, all those little things where a person knows what they need to do and now they need to run and find a tablet to move something in a queue. All those moments will sink this. And the aha moment was, well, what if we did something crazy like made our robots so a person could grab them and move them around, and that actually fed back into the system, telling what intent the person had. That was the aha moment.
Love that. Yeah. And when you articulate it like that, it just becomes very clear, right? You're mitigating any hurdle that would come up, because you hear those horror stories of, oh, we paid all this money for this and now no one knows how to use it, so we just put it to the side and we will do it manually anyway. So that's awesome.
Yeah, no, we've been in a facility where a robot was supposed to be doing something and they were very proud of it, so they were going to give us a demo of the robot. The one person who had permission to use the laptop had to go and find it, and it spent 25 minutes to get it running so that they could press the button so the thing could move. I'm like, okay, that's not a success.
And then what happens if that person's sick or leaves or, crazy. So obviously you mentioned your co-founder, Rodney Brooks, who he has had his own notable career in the robotics space as well. For anyone that doesn't know him, how did this team up come together, and what aligned everyone around this vision?
Yeah, so Rodney and I have known each other for over 30 years. We actually tried to work together before.
Cool.
He refers to it as he tried to date me and I said no. But I let him get away with that. But what really kind of aligned us was we have a very, very strong shared perspective on what's hard in robotics and what's easy. And the fact that human factors matter more for adoption than the raw technology. You have to consider both. Which is why, for example, the Roomba is the most successful robot in the world. There's 55 million of them. They do their job well. And when a person wants them to do something different, you pick it up by the little handle on top of it and you put it where you need it to be. And you press one button and it does its job. Yeah. So we just had a lot of alignment on that. And when we first started, part of the technology we built behind the scenes, Rodney originally referred to as a video game engine, but for robots. And I said to him, there's 10 people in the world who deeply understand both of those domains. I have a lot of thinking about it. I'll just tell you what I'm thinking. You can just take all these ideas, do whatever you want. That was at 10 a.m. and by 6 p.m. we'd agreed that, I was joining the founding team of whatever he was thinking about next.
Yeah, when it's meant to be, I guess. Yeah, I mean, after 30 years, it was bound to happen, I guess. So there you go. You finally said yes to the date. Here we are. Talking more about the technology then that you mentioned, what makes, because there's the cognitive engine, and then you've got this collaborative mobility approach. How is that different from what others are building in warehouse automation and other products that are on the market?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is it's designed for people first collaboration, which means the workers or floor associates can push the robot, redirect it, or interact with it naturally with no training. You literally can walk up to any of our robots, and the minute that you are close, it shuts down. The minute you put your hand on it, you literally feel the motors twitch a little bit, and it gives you the ability to move the robot. Then, of course, there's this handlebar that if you grab it, all the mass of the robot disappears. And with a feather touch, you can now move, with a fully loaded robot, which would be 350 pounds, effortlessly. The other big thing is we've jumped to what we're starting to refer to as the fourth generation of mobile robots, using no LiDAR and using only vision, and then using that vision to do crazy algorithms like visual simultaneous localization and mapping, and using a lot of neural networks to understand the input to those cameras. So we understand the world semantically. We have spatial awareness and semantic awareness. We know that's a person. We know that's a box. And that in some ways subtly changes how the robot works, but that subtlety matters in terms of the robot's capability and the robot's social acceptance. So, I'll stop after a few. Another big one is it's a single robot that has multiple functions. So our one robot can be used for picking, but it can also be used as what we call a dynamic sort wall. This is one of the things we showed in the Manifest trade show and ProMat earlier this year. Because the robot can present itself, it can drive around and present itself to a person in any direction that makes sense. It also has software addressable lights all over it, LED strips, so it can light up different parts of itself to tell a person where to put something or where to take something off. And of course, it has a touch screen and the handle. And by the time you combine those things, this is a design surface that allows us to essentially craft applications that work in space that require essentially no training for someone to do picking or for someone to sort a bunch of things that they just picked. So that really allows us to do flexible workflows for people, and really create kind of the right user experience and synergy for people, even though we're boosting productivity. At the end of the day, you're always looking at productivity and the ROI, but you do that in a way where people feel good about it. They're in a state of flow. They're getting a lot done, and they're doing it successfully because the robot's giving them these visual cues, and they're like, okay, that was just challenging enough, and wow, I just crushed my numbers. So
yeah, less effort, more higher throughput, right?
yeah. So I have my favorite story around that is one of our very early pilots. A supervisor asked one of the floor associates, "Oh, wait, what do you think about the robot?" And she said, "I like the robot, but I feel like it's slowing me down a little bit." And we of course filmed it, and you realize that what it did was it reduced cognitive load, because her supervisor said, "What are you talking about? You know, uh, look at the monitors." Because of course they have these big panels that show everyone. It's like, you're the only person in the green right now. And the moment there was, even though she was moving faster and higher productivity, it felt like she was working less. And then, of course, she sped up to the point where she felt like she was working at her normal pace. And then the numbers were even higher. And this was like the next day. But that moment, I think, was very telling.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very cool. I encourage everyone, and we'll obviously put all of this in the notes, but check out the videos, check out the website, just so you can get a visual of what Carter looks like, because it is that handle making everything feather light to move around. And then just even if you were doing like the sortation with the lights on it and all of that stuff, you think about the application. You don't even have to be in a warehouse environment or logistics environment to see the benefit of this. Or even if you were to plug yourself in there and you've got a robot bring you what you need and tell you where to put it, it's, you can train anyone in 10 minutes what to do. And then the ramp up time and adoption time is like near zero. So that's huge. That's huge. So this is, you guys obviously emphasize human-centered robotics. Is that what this means, would you say? Or
yeah, that's what this means. It's so I think it's more broad in that it's designed around real human behavior. We are a big part of our DNA is human robot interaction and the social science behind that. So there's no need for people to change their work to accommodate the robot to a large extent. We make the interfaces as intuitive as possible and really allow that. We absolutely stick by the philosophy that this has to be about empowering workers, because while there might be shortcuts that in thinking you could be a little bit more productive if you didn't empower people, that just blows up. The backlash from that just blows up on you, and it actually ends up being counterproductive. And we just try and make it as natural as possible and kind of underpin that with focusing on trust and usability, because at the end of the day, you have to be honest with what you're doing with floor associates so that they buy into it, so that they really see this as something that they're partnering with, getting into a state of flow and getting that higher productivity. And it's a win-win, because it's actually what they want. A big part of our research in building this was all of this, all of these psychological techniques to get down to one question, which we don't ask directly, is like, what's your impression of a good day? And, there were over 120 people in one of these instruments that we use. And it's not more coffee breaks. It's not, I want to walk slower. It's, I want my stuff to work. I want to be productive, and I want to feel a sense of satisfaction at the end of the day. And I'm like, oh, okay. So if we can make those align with something that gives the facility higher productivity, everyone wins. And that's what we designed to.
That's great. And I think in this current economy or current climate where most of these facilities are understaffed, giving them something that allows the same staff to produce more, like higher throughput, higher quality work, less mistakes, and making a better environment for the employee, it's a no-brainer, right? That must be like such an easy sell.
It's it is on that, because everyone in this industry is fighting with retention, and potential high turnover. Um, you know, it's it's been really enjoyable and humbling to work in this space. People who do these jobs are, dedicated and have a strong sense of satisfaction. And if you give them the tools that they need to be highly productive, they're really appreciative. And that's true up and down the chain. And people may think that, these facilities are, the work can be hard, but they're really supportive. I've been in a facility where, you're walking around with a plant manager. They know the name of everyone on the floor. We're like, this is amazing. And then when we ask about it, oh, yeah, he has like 4 events at his house every year, like this big barbecue, this thing, and everyone comes. And that's the type of environment that you will sometimes see in these places. It's, so people who run facilities get it, that it's people first, and any tools that you can give them to help them meet the needs of being more productive and doing that in a people first way. It's an easy starting conversation.
Yeah, they're taking care of their employees, right? And then it's going to take care of the business. And you think from the employee standpoint as well, would they leave that facility to go somewhere else without that technology enabling their job to be better and their satisfaction and numbers to be better? So
yeah, we're young enough that we don't have as comprehensive longitudinal data on this as I would like, but there is plenty of good data, cough, cough, from some of my competitors that shows when you have robotics, and especially robotics that feels human-centric in any way, floor associates appropriately recognize that as an investment in them. And that becomes part of their decision about whether or not they're going to leave or go somewhere else, because the job in fact gets better, and it shows that the company is trying to make the job better. And that's a really, really important factor, because no one has enough labor right now.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Do you think robots can truly understand and adapt to human intent, or is it more about like managing expectations and edge cases better?
Yeah, I don't think robots can truly understand human intent. I think even our best models right now for activity recognition and intent prediction are shallow. However, combining those with context, I think, can get you a user experience that's pretty amazing. So, for example, Carter responds to physical cues and simple actions like moving the robot or a person being in the way. And just doing that naturally lends itself to a much smoother interaction and therefore higher productivity. You don't end up needing complex commands or to deeply understand intent when the set of possible behaviors is relatively small. And the task. The great thing about being in logistics or being in manufacturing, everyone, knows the job, and the robot's also one of the things that has a job. So people's behavior can easily be parsed to understand. Are people expecting the robot to move now? Are people expecting the robot to stop now? And by combining that with appropriate visual cues, like the robot having a big display saying what it's doing and what's next, so that before a person even gets close to it, they have some context about the job it's trying to do. Yeah, that really gets you to this smooth interaction. So I think it's a combination of smart models and relentless focus on user experience design.
Yeah, yeah. I guess the more users, the more adoption you have, the more data you gather, the more refinement, and it just like it compounds to improve the product and the way it's working.
Absolutely. That's one of the things we're most excited about as we scale.
Where are you seeing the most traction today? Like what type of customers or industries or even size of facilities are using?
Yeah, so we are focused in logistics and manufacturing right now. We do see broad applicability across a number of industries over time. Healthcare, retail, hospitality, airports. But we're a startup, so we're very focused to begin with, and we are serving operations where you need people to be part of the solution, so that we can support and help those people, and especially operations where traditional automation would struggle. So anywhere where using other types of mobile robots or other types of automation would be stymied, we end up being a good fit. And part of that, of course, is we're early. So early adopters who've struggled with something else and are looking for a solution that's kind of a breakthrough, see us as a good choice. We of course have this large relationship with DHL that we've publicized. And after our recent deployment, we just shared publicly that they got more than 60% productivity increase in this, in a existing picking operation. And again, because of our model and because of how fast, you bring us up, you see that in, week one. So
60% is huge.
And keep in mind, DHL is not just the number one in size, they're the number one operator in the space. So we're starting at the top of the game to try it.
Yeah. I mean, if you can prove it there. Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations. That's huge. What would you say has been harder? Is it building the technology behind robust AI and Carter, or getting organizations and companies to actually adopt the tech, like getting your foot in the door so they can actually take it seriously and adopt it?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'd say, the tech is, of course, hard and it's taken a long time. However, I think change management is harder. Certainly for us now, the tech's ready, and it was based on a vision that was pretty clear to us, a couple of years ago. And I think this is true not just for us, but I think it's true for robotics in general and for AI. I think the change management piece is the biggest gating factor. A lot of, especially around AI right now, I think there's a lot of blistering innovation, new models with new benchmarks every 6 months. That pace is faster than people's ability to adopt. So I don't know about you, but every time I use an LLM that's different than the one that I use every day, I first have to go and find the synopsis of what are the 4 models they've released in the last 3 months and which model is meant for what. And then so there's, I think, unfortunately, we still have the wetware that we evolved, that kind of evolved over the last million years to differentiate us from other primates. And that's the gating factor. So when you're introducing any type of automation, I think the change management piece is the hardest.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a very good point. And that, the rate of adoption is, it just got, AI is completely changing everything. I've mentioned this a few times on the show, but it was very eye-opening at the time when I'm having conversations about AI and LLMs, with my in-laws at Thanksgiving dinner, like 2 years ago, when before that no one was talking about it, and now everyone's got an opinion about which model to use and what like what is going on now.
No, I mean, and sorry, that's what's happening with LLMs, as it pertains specifically to us. Most of the models we use are visual in nature. So it would be anything from straight deep learning models to VLMs. And, someone recently asked me to, it was one of these more due diligence-y things, list the algorithms you use, whatever. I'm like, yeah, we can list them, but this isn't going to be useful to you. Because I guarantee the list that we use is different 3 months from now, different 6 months from now. Because the pace of evolution is such that we kind of just have this queue of models that we're trying out. And when the performance and safety passes the threshold of the existing model, we switch over. We build a thing that can run multiple models in parallel. And we're all riding this wave of innovation. And our robot's no different.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Let's talk about hiring, because that's obviously something that is very personal to me, something that I focus on every day. And I'm curious to get your take on a few things, because you've built teams at some of the world's top tech companies. Now at Robust AI, what do you look for when you're hiring in a robotics startup?
Yeah, so I think a few things. Of course, deep skill in whatever specialty the person has. But robotics is the most multidisciplinary thing that I'm aware of. You need 3 different brands of software people. Embedded, roboticists, raw software engineers, and that's full stack, because it goes all the way from something on robot up to the cloud. Just as an example, on the mechanical side, you need mechanical engineers, mechatronics engineers, electrical engineers, and that's just on the engineering side. And then you need product and user experience, so that you actually build something that is appropriate for humans, and so on. So we of course then look for people who have the ability to work with others and have the ability to work with other disciplines. That's an important part of what we look for. And something that we realize is a unifying theme across people we have and people who get really excited about us is a deep desire to build useful robots. As roboticists, most of us have had at least one experience where we've spent 3 to 5 years working on something that didn't come to fruition, or working on something that was 10 years ahead of its time. And at the end, at some point, you really want the fruit of your labor to be out in the world, having a positive impact for real people. So that's also something that's a pretty strong quality in the people who both we look for and who get excited about being here.
Yeah, we see it time and time again now for that same reason, whether it's we're pulling people from the self-driving car space or some sort of stealth project that just has been spinning their wheels or come to market and no one wants it. And after a while, even great engineers are like, I love what I do, but I really want a real world impact. I really want to see it go commercial. I want it to be, manufactured by the hundreds of thousands instead of testing our MVP with 3 customers. And I'm like, I get it, and it's the allure. I think some of it comes from academia, right? Like people end up going down, depending on what level of education they have, but you've got a lot of research influence and focus, and then making that transition to commercial isn't for everyone. But after a period of time, like you said, you want your time, effort, your labor to show in the world. Yeah. So it's very true. And I love it when candidates tell me that, honestly. What do you think the hardest to hire roles are right now in this space? And do you think there's any hiring myths that you think need to die surrounding those?
There's a couple. I think many roles around AI right now are hard to hire for just because of the demand. But I'm going to be really specific. I think for us and for people in robotics, I think what it's hard to hire for because I don't think a mature example of it exists yet. But people who are comfortable doing embedded programming on edge AI devices, just getting all the way down to the metal and writing algorithms and code that run on, pick your NVIDIA flavor of the day. That's going to be on some robot that you want to have really high performance. And you really need to, and you're building a system where you have to have a very clear picture of what's running on that piece of hardware and for safety, compliance, etc., and for system performance. And I think there's some people who are starting to gain a lot of skill there, but it's there's still a pretty big dearth of talent and availability there.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a really good one. It's so competitive. Anything you put AI on anything right now, and it's
actually,
competitive.
I just thought of another one, and I'll say because Rodney's not here, but Rodney in my mind just started saying something, and I'd say more broadly, programmers who are comfortable getting close to the metal and understanding performance. I do think one of the things that is happening because of the trend of most coding having been on the web and in the cloud over the last 20 years, programmers who actually know what's happening in a CPU and in memory for code that they've written is very rare now. And it used to be that was where everyone started, but now you can just start with JavaScript, and then JavaScript and Python, and you really have no idea what's going on underneath. Sorry, so those will be my two.
Yeah, I love that. Is there like an actionable piece of hiring advice that you'd give to other execs or founders in the space?
Yeah, there's one that I give constantly, which is think about culture in hiring from the start. From the moment it's you and your co-founder, and you're thinking, okay, who's that third person? Think about the culture you want to build and give a little bit more weight to the right cultural aspects. Like, let's say you want a really high intensity team, and there's two candidates who are close in, say, their programming capabilities. Pick the one who's going to be a bit more rabid, because that's you're laying the pillars for your culture from the beginning. Because if you're not intentional about it, it will just evolve. And the way I think about it is, be willing to take that 5% or 10% hit at the individual level. Okay, maybe this person doesn't know, this part of one library that you care about. But if they're the right culture fit, what you're going to get is better team performance. And that's actually a bigger accelerator than that, 5% that you saved, or, by having that person spend a week learning some library that they didn't know. And I think that's I've seen that pay dividends again and again, really over the last 20 some years since we built Sapient, really through all of the experiences that I've had since then.
That's awesome. I've got a few questions around that, but like that is great advice, and I think can be super impactful. And I'm huge about culture as well. I'm curious. You mentioned being mindful of or intentional about the culture you want to build, right? And I think where a lot of people misstep, they use culture fit and they forget about like culture add, or like you've said, like, hey, we want to have a X type of culture, like we want it to be rapid, we want it to be etc. How do you balance that at that early stage? If it's two co-founders, maybe they're both like introspective and like the ideas kind of people, but they want like bias for action or rapid, so they want to hire that. How do they manage those people, or what's some advice for them to deal with that instead of the bias of more people like me?
Yeah, I've seen, I think the like any goal setting, I think writing it down does 50% of the work. Just taking a step out and saying, okay, what culture do we want to create? And you have that conversation with your co-founder and you say, you know what? I'm one of these people. My strength is synthesis. So I am really good at having 20 semi-conflicting points of view in my head at the same time. And I will go and find those. But therefore, I need a couple people around me who have a bias to action so that we keep all the plates spinning all the time. And weirdly, that makes me more comfortable because I know the plates are spinning and I have my three lieutenants who just make stuff happen so that I can solve the bigger thing that no one else is thinking about that we need solved 2 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now or 3 months from now. And just by being explicit about that, here's what we need, here's my strengths and weaknesses, what do we need as a counterbalance? And that's part of the answer. We're like, oh, okay. So to get to the culture that we want, to get to the performance that we want, here's a whole. Now we know a little bit more about what we want in that role or what we need from that person or what we need from that profile. And just by articulating it and then having a conversation about it, you make a tremendous amount of progress.
That's great. Love that. Love that. Love that. And I hope a lot of people have taken notes on that or re-listened to that because culture, especially at the early days, is so, so important. What would you say, looking at the industry as a whole now, what are some of the biggest misconceptions out there about robotics and especially in the logistics, automation, manufacturing space?
Yeah. So I think probably number one is that all robotics replace people. I think in reality, they can augment human work and reduce physical strain. I think, a piggyback on that is that the goal in automation is to get rid of all of the people. Even when someone's title is VP of automation behind closed doors, they all say we're not going to get rid of all the people, even if that's literally what their job is supposed to be. I maybe one of the other myths is more sensors equals better robots. I actually think a small number of sensors that are well understood and a lot of really smart code gets you better solutions. We do everything on Carter with 8 cameras, no LiDAR, nothing else. No LiDAR, but things like our handlebar sense forces when a person touches it. We measure the back EMF in motors, so we know if we went over a bump in the road or someone bumped the robot. So there's these other ways to understand the world. I think there is a lot of expectation because of industrial robots, where people expect robots to need a perfect environment, because that was historically true. That is going by the wayside. And then maybe the last, what do you say, misconception? I'll say is that robots solve the problem. I would say robots are a piece of the solution. At the end of the day, customers don't care if it's a robot or not. What they care about is solving their problem or increasing their productivity or reducing strain for workers. Like, that's the outcome. So in some ways, we sometimes harshly say it as the robot doesn't matter, which we can say to ourselves internally. The robot doesn't matter. What matters is the customer getting the experience. So I think that's maybe a misconception that people harp on.
Sure, I've heard it in another way as well, like don't focus on making the product, focus on the solution, right? So sometimes the product you're making might not be the right thing for that application. You don't want to over engineer it for no reason, but yeah, it's so true. If we zoom out 10 years, what role do you think human robot collaboration will play across industries, various industries?
Oh, I think it will dominate how people interact with robots and automation, because I think we are moving from the stage of single task machines to more general purpose machines. And that's true across the board. The robots that we build now are just more capable and at a lower price point. So you're going to get lots of adoption. And, I sometimes use the analogy that we're going from flip phones to smartphones. But one of the things that makes smartphones work is an incredible and consistent user experience on top of, a million applications and an entire operating system. So that only works if people can, with a relatively small lift, adopt a given workflow or a given application or a given modality that a robot can assume. And as the opportunities proliferate, you need better and better user experience and human robot collaboration so that people could take advantage of it. Because as I said before, the limiting factor is people's ability to change. So if you design stuff that requires a minimum of that change, you're going to get the most adoption.
Awesome. All right, before we wrap, I want to do a quick rapid fire few questions, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
All right. A robot from pop culture that gets it mostly right. What do you think?
I'll just go with my favorite robot, which is TARS from the movie Interstellar. Literally looks like a giant shiny block of metal, but then turns into whatever it needs to be in a really smart way.
Yeah. I saw someone that made one recently, actually, online. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Very cool. Yeah, very cool. I mean, obviously it doesn't do everything that TARS does, but looked like TARS and walked like TARS. What's the hardest leadership lesson that you've had to learn?
I think there's two pieces and they're a little bit similar. I know this one is probably overdone, but making decisions when someone no longer needs to be in your company, making that decision quickly and effectively. Said another way, people very seldom say, I fired that person too soon. But then I love a lesson that I got from one of my investors who was a legendary founder. His first lesson in leadership is, if you are loyal to one, you are loyal to none. And the idea is that as a leader, your job is to maximize the outcome for the group of people who has put their trust in you. And you have to do this massive optimization across all of those parties. And you can't do that if you're giving certain parties inappropriately special treatment. And that's hard to do, because sometimes people will say to you, I expect XYZ because I'm in this position. And you have to say, well, I understand why you might want that. And I can understand why that's great for Greg. But I don't think that that's the best outcome for Greg and Robust and the shareholders or whoever the conflicting groups are.
It's much bigger than one person. Yeah. I think that is a great lesson to share and for people to take note of. What's one startup in robotics, other than obviously Robust AI, that you're watching closely?
I'm going to pass on this one because I think there's too much potential conflict.
Okay. What's one type of robot that you're most interested in for the future?
Actually, I think this one is interesting. I think we are just scratching the surface of what drones are going to do. So I actually think there's two things. I think we're just touching the surface of what drones are going to do, and we're not even scratching the surface yet on what underwater submersible robots are going to do. We have more than 70% of the planet to explore. We finally have a way to do that. And at some point when the world is in a more we'll discover incredible bounty on the other 70% of the planet that right now we have such limited access to.
Amazing. Thank you. I wasn't expecting that, but great answer. I thought you were going to say humanoids, like everyone else wants to talk about, but no, that was a much better answer.
No, no.
Great. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. I know we're at time now, and I'm obviously very conscious and respectful of yours because you're so busy. I really appreciate you being on the 100th episode here and sharing your experiences, your insights, and about robust AI. It means a lot. Thank you. Is there anything that you want to share in closing, whether it's advice or something to watch out for, or a bit about robust AI that our listeners should know?
No, I think we've hit all the important things as we went through. Thank you so much, Greg.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Let's keep in touch, and hopefully I'll speak to you soon. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you.